Hi there, my name is James, and welcome to our True Crime channel. Today, we're telling the chilling story of Dr. Clara Valen, a psychologist whose buried memories uncovered a dark family secret. It's a story of forgotten pasts, hidden experiments, and the shocking truth that changed everything. Stay with us as we dive into the mystery behind the Valen family. Langston Ridge, nestled in the Appalachian Mountains, is a peaceful town where life moves at a slow and steady pace. But beneath the surface of its tranquility lies a secret that's been hidden for decades within the walls of one family's home. At the center of this mystery is Dr. Clara Valen, a renowned psychologist known for her work in helping people unlock their deepest repressed memories. For years, Clara has dedicated her career to guiding others through the darkest corners of their minds, helping them recover from their most painful experiences. But what Clara never expected was that her own mind would begin to unravel. It started small, strange sensations she couldn't explain, flashes of memories that didn't quite make sense. Then came the hallucinations, whispers in the night, shadows that seemed to follow her, and vivid dreams that left her questioning what was real. Clara's steady grip on her life began to slip as she experienced more blackouts, finding herself in places without knowing how she had gotten there. Her memories of the past were scattered and incomplete, leaving her feeling lost and scared. What Clara didn't know was that her own buried memories held the key to a devastating family secret, a secret that had been carefully hidden for decades, one she played a central role in, and one that was about to come crashing back into her life. Soon, Clara would uncover the truth. But could she handle it? It was September 21st, 2022, a night Clara Valen would never forget. She woke up suddenly in her family's old study, disoriented and confused. The room felt strange, colder, heavier. Clara tried to remember how she had gotten there, but her mind was blank. She stood up slowly, her body tense. The dim light in the study barely pushed back the shadows. Everything seemed off. As she looked around, her eyes fell on the desk. Old family photos were scattered across it, photos she hadn't touched in years. One picture stood out, a childhood photo of her and her father, the edges worn like it had been handled many times. But Clara had no memory of pulling these photos out. Suddenly, a sharp sting caught her attention. She glanced down and noticed a fresh scratch on her arm, red, raw, and stinging. But how had it gotten there? Panic stirred in her chest. Then, something else, a faint smell that lingered in the air. It was familiar, too familiar. Her mother's perfume was the same scent her mother used to wear before she died. Clara's heart raced. How could that smell be here now, after all these years? She tried to piece everything together. How long had she been in the study? Why couldn't she remember walking here? Why did everything feel so wrong? Clara wanted to believe it was just exhaustion, that the long hours at work were getting to her. But something about this felt different, deeper, darker. As Clara left the study and walked back to her bedroom, the weight of her missing memories gnawed at her. Something was off, something she couldn't shake. She tried to brush it off, convincing herself it was just stress. After all, she had been through a lot lately. But in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that this was only the beginning. That night, as Clara lay in bed, her thoughts drifted to her half-sister Fiona. They hadn't spoken in years. Their relationship had always been strained, especially after their father's death. But maybe Fiona would remember something Clara couldn't. Maybe these blackouts were connected to their childhood, the parts Clara had always struggled to remember. The next day, September 22nd, 2022, Clara heard a knock at her door. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened it, she was shocked to see Fiona, her half-sister, standing there after years of silence. Fiona looked different, tired, worn down, her eyes sharper than Clara remembered. She wasted no time getting to the point. "We need to talk, Clara," Fiona said, her voice firm. She stepped inside, clearly on a mission. Clara could feel the tension in the air. They hadn't spoken since their father's death all those years ago. Their relationship had always been strained, but Fiona had cut ties completely after leaving Langston Ridge. Clara had stayed, trying to live a quiet life. Now Fiona was back, and it wasn't just for a casual visit. "I've been looking into Dad's death," Fiona said, dropping a stack of papers onto the kitchen table. Clara's stomach twisted at her words. She didn't want to reopen old wounds. Their father had died in what was ruled an accident, falling down the stairs. But Fiona wasn't convinced. "There's more to it, Clara. I found documents, old letters," Fiona continued, her voice low. "Dad wasn't just a psychologist. He was involved in something else, experiments on memory repression." Clara shook her head, trying to dismiss it. "I don't want to hear this, Fiona. We've been over this before. It was an accident." She wanted to believe it. She needed to believe it. But Fiona was persistent. "I'm telling you it wasn't an accident," Fiona said, flipping through the documents. "Dad was part of a secret research group. He was experimenting on people. I think he did it to you too." Clara recoiled. The idea that their father had experimented on her, on his own children, was unthinkable. "You've lost it," she muttered, trying to push Fiona's claims aside. But deep down, something gnawed at her. The blackouts, the strange feelings, the memories she could never quite piece together. Could Fiona be right? Fiona leaned closer, her voice softening but remaining insistent. "I'm not making this up, Clara. I've spent months digging into this. Dad was involved in dangerous work, and I think it's why you're blacking out, why you're hearing things." Clara didn't respond. She couldn't. The fear she had felt the night before in the study returned, creeping into her chest. She wanted to shut Fiona out and push her back out the door, but the weight of her words settled too deeply in her mind. "I'm not ready for this," Clara finally whispered, turning away from her sister. Fiona didn't push further. "I'm staying at the motel for a few days. If you change your mind, call me." And with that, Fiona left. Clara stood in the quiet house, her thoughts spinning. The doubts Fiona had planted were growing. If she was right, then their father's death, her blackouts, the hallucinations, they were all connected to something far more sinister than she ever imagined. Over the next week, Clara's blackouts became more frequent, and her sense of unease deepened. Late at night, she began hearing whispers in the walls. At first, they were faint, like distant echoes, but soon they became clearer, repeating the same cryptic phrase. "You were there." The Vallon family estate, once a place of comfort, now felt unsettling. The hallways seemed darker and colder, with a lingering feeling that Clara wasn't alone. Every step she took made her feel like someone was watching her. The shadows in the corners seemed to stretch and shift as she moved, and a cold draft blew through the old house, sending chills down her spine. By September 28, 2022, things escalated further. Clara woke up in her father's study again, disoriented. She hadn't been there when she fell asleep. As she scanned the room, her eyes landed on a stack of papers scattered across the desk. She hadn't touched these papers in years. Among them was an old document dated April 12, 1990, the day her father died. Her breath caught in her throat as she read through the pages. They were research notes, detailing experiments on memory repression, notes written by her father. As she flipped through the pages, a single sentence stood out. "Test subject, Clara Vallon." Clara's heart raced. Could her father have experimented on her? She struggled to make sense of it, but then something else slipped from the folder. It was a photograph. In the picture, Clara was a young child, standing in her father's study. Her face was circled, and beneath it, her father had written, "She was there." A chill ran down her spine. What had her father done to her? What memories had been buried, and why were they now fighting their way back? By October 3rd, 2022, Fiona had gone deeper into her investigation. She couldn't shake the feeling that their father's death wasn't an accident. She had uncovered a name, Peter Matthews, a patient from 1990, the same year their father died. Matthews had been admitted to Langston Ridge Mental Hospital, where their father worked, and he had gone missing under mysterious circumstances. Fiona suspected there was a connection. Fiona showed up at Clara's house, determined to share what she had found. Her face was tense with urgency. "Clara, you need to see this," Fiona said, pushing her way inside. Clara hesitated, but Fiona was relentless. She laid out documents on the table, medical records, notes, and letters, all pointing to their father's involvement in dangerous memory repression experiments. Among them were papers that suggested Peter Matthews had been a test subject in their father's secret research. "Dad was experimenting on his patients," Fiona said, flipping through the papers. "But that's not all. I think he was experimenting on us too." Clara's stomach churned. "That's impossible, Fiona. You don't know what you're talking about." But Fiona didn't stop. "You've been having blackouts, right? Hearing things? I'm telling you, it's all connected. He was manipulating our memories." Her voice trembled with intensity. "There's something we've forgotten, Clara. Something he made us forget." Clara recoiled at the idea, but the words echoed in her mind. The blackouts, the hallucinations, the fragmented memories. They were all real, and they were getting worse. Deep down, she feared Fiona might be right. Fiona continued, pulling out a letter she had found in their father's old office. "I found this too. It's addressed to a colleague, Dr. Naomi Jacobs. In it, Dad talks about testing his memory repression techniques on someone close to him, someone who was vulnerable." Clara's heart raced as Fiona read the letter aloud. Her father had been researching how to erase traumatic memories, and he had used his own daughters as test subjects. The realization hit Clara like a wave, and she felt the room spin. Could their father really have done this to them? Fiona's voice softened, but her conviction remained strong. "We've been living in a lie, Clara. All these years we've been running from the truth. But it's time to face it. We need to figure out what really happened to us." Clara stood frozen, her mind racing. Everything she thought she knew about her past, her father, and even herself was unraveling. Fiona's words hung heavy in the air, and for the first time, Clara couldn't push them away. By October 7th, 2022, Clara's blackouts had become unbearable. The whispers in the walls were louder now, and her memory gaps were growing larger. That night, it all reached a breaking point. She woke up in her father's study once again, but this time, something felt different, heavier, more intense. The air was thick, suffocating. Clara's hands shook as she looked around the room, her eyes falling on the same scattered papers she had seen days before. Her heart raced as she felt a familiar yet distant sense of dread building inside her. This time, she noticed something new, a family photo album she hadn't touched in years, lying open on the floor. As she slowly knelt down and flipped through the pages, she saw pictures of herself as a child, smiling innocently. But as she turned the pages, the memories that had been hidden deep inside her mind began to claw their way back to the surface. Suddenly, a flood of images hit her. The day was April 12th, 1990, the day her father died. She had been only 8 years old. It had been a normal day, or so she thought. She was playing in the front yard when she heard a loud crash from inside the house. She ran toward the sound, her small feet pounding up the stairs. When she reached the second floor, she saw her father, Dr. Alistair Valen, standing at the top of the stairs, furious. He was yelling at her mother, his face red with anger. Clara froze at the sight, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never seen him so angry before. Her mother was crying, pleading with him to stop, but her father's rage only grew. Clara stood there, unable to move, fear gripping her body. Then, without thinking, she ran toward her father, her small hands pushing against his chest. Everything slowed down. Clara watched in horror as her father stumbled backward. His arms flailed, his body teetering on the edge of the staircase. Then, with a sickening thud, he fell down the stairs, his body hitting each step with a horrifying force. Clara's breath caught in her throat as she watched her father's lifeless form at the bottom of the staircase. In the chaos that followed, Clara had blocked out the memory. The police came, and it was ruled a tragic accident. But now, standing in the study, the full weight of what had happened crashed down on her. She had been the one who pushed him. She had caused his death. Clara collapsed into the chair, her body trembling. The truth she had buried for so long had finally resurfaced. She had pushed her father in a moment of fear, a moment of instinct, but the guilt was overwhelming. All these years, she had convinced herself it had been an accident, something out of her control. But now she knew. She was the reason her father was dead. Tears streamed down her face as the realization sank in. The blackouts, the whispers, the gaps in her memory. It had all been leading to this moment. Her father's death wasn't just a tragic accident. It was something far more complex, wrapped in layers of fear and manipulation. But as the truth settled in, another question rose to the surface. What else had been buried in her mind? What other secrets had her father hidden from her? By October 8, 2022, Clara could no longer bear the weight of her memories. The guilt of what she had remembered was crushing her. She dialed Fiona's number, her hands trembling. Fiona arrived at the house, concern etched on her face. She had been expecting a call, but not like this. "Fiona, I need to tell you something," Clara said, her voice shaky. Fiona sat down, bracing herself for what was coming. Clara's eyes were red, her face pale. "It wasn't an accident," Clara whispered. "I pushed him. I killed Dad." Fiona froze, her mind spinning. "What are you talking about?" she asked softly. Tears streamed down Clara's face as she explained. "I was just a kid. He was so angry. I was scared, and I pushed him down the stairs. I didn't mean to, but I did." The words came out in a flood, each one heavier than the last. Fiona's face softened. She moved closer to Clara and wrapped her arms around her. "Clara, listen to me. You were a child. You were terrified. Dad was a manipulator. He wasn't a good man." Clara shook her head, the guilt too much to handle. "But I did it, Fiona. I caused his death." "It wasn't your fault," Fiona insisted. "You were trying to protect yourself. He manipulated us, our memories, our minds. What happened that day wasn't just because of you. It was because of him." Fiona's voice was steady, but her heart was breaking for her sister. Clara looked at Fiona, her eyes full of pain and confusion. "What do we do now?" she whispered. Fiona took a deep breath. "We have to face the truth. Dad's experiments, his manipulation, it all has to come out. We need to uncover everything he did to us." Clara nodded, but deep down, she wasn't sure if she was ready for what was still buried in their past. By October 15th, 2022, things had escalated. After Clara's confession, Detective Marcus Bennett reopened the case of Dr. Alistair Valen's death. Clara's revelation about pushing her father led Bennett to dig deeper into the events of April 12, 1990. Something about the original investigation had never quite sat right with him, and now, with this new information, he was determined to uncover the truth. As he reviewed the old coroner's report, Bennett noticed details that had been overlooked. There were bruises on Alistair's wrists that hadn't been fully explained. At the time, they had been dismissed as part of the fall, but Bennett now suspected there had been a struggle before Alistair went down the stairs. Meanwhile, Fiona had been digging into their father's research files, trying to piece together the larger picture. She was convinced that their father's memory repression experiments held the key to everything. During her search, she found a letter their father had written to his colleague, Dr. Naomi Jacobs, just days before his death. In the letter, Alistair spoke about pushing the boundaries of memory repression and mentioned that he was conducting trials on family members. But what Fiona found next was even more disturbing. The letter hinted at something far worse, the death of their mother, Lucille Vallin. For years they had believed their mother died of natural causes. But Alistair's letter implied otherwise. He wrote about experimenting with toxins that could erase memories without leaving physical traces. Fiona was horrified to realize that their father may have poisoned their mother and then manipulated their memories to cover it up. Fiona rushed to Clara with the letter in hand. "He didn't just experiment on us, Clara. I think he killed Mom." Clara's heart sank as she read the letter. The weight of the truth was crushing. Their father had not only controlled their minds, but he had also destroyed their family from the inside out. Detective Bennett, now with more pieces of the puzzle, began to suspect that Alistair had manipulated his daughter's memories to hide his role in their mother's death. The investigation, once thought to be a simple accidental death, was now unraveling into something far darker and more sinister. The sisters were left to face the grim truth. Their father's manipulation went deeper than they ever imagined, and the full extent of his experiments might never be known. By October 20th, 2022, Fiona had uncovered the final pieces of their father's dark secret. Through her relentless digging, she found more records that showed just how far Dr. Alistair Valen's experiments had gone. He hadn't just repressed their memories. He had been conducting unethical experiments on both Clara and Fiona for years, using them as subjects without their knowledge. His goal had been to push the limits of memory suppression, erasing traumatic events entirely. One of the most disturbing revelations was that their father had intentionally planted false memories to cover up his own crimes, including the poisoning of their mother, Lucille Vallin. He had carefully constructed a narrative in their minds to make them believe she died naturally, when in fact he had been responsible for her death. For Clara, the final blow came when she realized the depth of her own repression. Her mind had not only been manipulated by her father, but had also buried certain memories to protect her from the pain of what she had done. The blackout on the day of her father's death wasn't just a random occurrence. It was her mind's way of shielding her from the unbearable truth. Clara had spent years convincing herself that her father's death was an accident, but now she knew it had been the result of years of manipulation, fear, and control. She hadn't just been a passive victim. She had subconsciously blocked out the memories to protect herself. The sisters now understood the full horror of their past. Their father's experiments had not only destroyed their childhood, but had also stolen their very sense of reality. But at least now, they had the truth. By October 25th, 2022, Detective Marcus Bennett had concluded his investigation. After reviewing all the evidence, he determined that Clara was not criminally liable for her father's death. It was clear that Dr. Alistair Valen's manipulation and experiments had directly led to the tragic events of April 12, 1990. The bruises on his wrists, the memory suppression research, and the revelations about their mother's death all painted a chilling picture of a man consumed by control. The media quickly picked up the story, dubbing it the Valen Memory Murder. Journalists flooded Langston Ridge, eager to uncover every detail of the twisted story. The headlines spoke of a father who had manipulated his own daughter's minds to hide his crimes, leaving a legacy of psychological abuse and dark secrets. For Clara and Fiona, the truth brought both relief and pain. They had uncovered the reality behind their father's experiments and their mother's murder, but the scars ran deep. The road to recovery would be long, and the memories of what their father had done would always haunt them. Standing together in front of their family home, Clara and Fiona reflected on everything they had learned. The whispers that had once haunted Clara's mind had quieted, but the emotional weight remained. They knew they could never truly escape the past, but now, at least, they could face it. "The truth always finds its way back," Clara whispered, as they walked away from the house, ready to start a new chapter. And that brings us to the end of the story of Dr. Clara Valen and the dark secrets buried within her family. What do you think? Could Clara and Fiona ever truly move on from their father's manipulation? And what would you do if your own memories were hiding something terrible? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story as gripping as we did, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe for more true crime stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.